This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
We got a busy show for you, friends. Parliamentarians are back. Ottawa's about to get a whole lot busier. And of course, this is, if you're into political storylines, and who isn't, the very first time that Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre will actually truly show down past the campaign trail, right? This is where the rubber hits the road. All of these campaign promises made by the Liberals, well, now they're on the clock. People will look for delivery on those promises, and all the talk on Pierre Poilievre and how he can provide, or at least present, a better picture of what Canada could look like, of what politics could look like, of what building things in Canada might look like, what the economy could look like under a conservative government. Well, this is where Pierre Poilievre will start to oppose Mark Carney officially in the House and try to convince Canadians that he would have been the better choice. It's about to get big time, and today, of course, as you know, every Monday, as we come to you live from our studio in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton, our very own and wonderful friend, Supriya Dwivedi, joining us the first episode of every week in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Supriya, we've got a lot to get to, obviously, not just Parliament resuming, which is a big story anytime, fall session, but we've also got the fallout from that Charlie Kirk murder just less than a week ago. Of course, we're going to want to talk to you again. You are sort of voice, our perspective from Ontario as well. Bonnie Crombie, a tepid show of support, let's say, from Ontario Liberals, and so she says she's going to step down, but it does feel like with as much as we do have to talk about, Parliament resuming is the big one. This is what Canadians have been looking for. This is when the Liberals are expected to and can start to deliver. What's the number one story you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great lead up there, Ryan. I think the first thing that I'll be sort of looking for, and you already touched on this, is how Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney are going to, communicate with one another in terms of their style across from each other in the House. Now, question period, normal people don't really tune in, right? Like that's really very much a political nerd kind of thing to do regularly. But it'll be interesting to see what themes the Conservatives really hone in on. And I think we already know it's going to be tough on crime stuff, but on the Liberal side of the House, they're going to be introducing legislation pretty quickly. And we've heard from this from Carney and from Minister Fraser, his Justice Minister, on that respect. But what I'm really going to be looking for is specifically Michelle Rempel-Garner versus the Immigration Minister, because we know they're going to go really hard on the temporary foreign workers program on the Conservative side. We've heard Carney defend the program just a couple of weeks ago. And I think it's an opening here for the Conservatives to not just hammer the Liberals on some of the traditional immigration gripes that they may have had with respect to infrastructure not keeping up, like healthcare and housing and the like, but how exploitative this program can be. And they can really show themselves to be on the side of workers.
I feel like sometimes maybe I'll take it for granted there will be people that are hearing Real Talk for the very first time today, that see it for the very first time today. So let me do the preamble that perhaps, and first of all, my apologies if I just roll in hot because we're pals and I don't list your full CV every single time we talk, but a long-time talk radio host you are. Of course, a nationally read pundit. We're going to talk about one of your pieces in The Star in just a couple of minutes. You say Mark Carney is not who he said he was. But of course, most recently, you served as a senior advisor for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So you've seen a lot of things from the inside. You understand how it works. Take us into the TFW story, because it seems to be one of those things when people start talking about TFWs or temporary foreign workers, it can get a certain subset of the voting population all worked up. But I hear it from across the spectrum, many different perspectives. Some Canadians believe that the temporary foreign workers are stealing Canadian jobs. I hear a lot of other Canadians, including working in agriculture, in retail, in food services, many of them conservatives, that tell me that without a proper, robust, evidence-based temporary foreign worker policy, they wouldn't be able to operate their businesses. So what was the sense in the Trudeau PMO, and where do you expect that the Carney PMO might be right now on this file?
So I think, you pointed out a lot of really good things, particularly with certain sectors that are quite dependent on temporary foreign workers. Agriculture is definitely one of them, right? Another one that we've seen temporary foreign workers really step up to fill the labor gap is in healthcare. And particularly post-pandemic, we've needed quite a few folks to step up in the healthcare space, and they've filled that gap. I think what's really driving right now some of the sentiment against the program, and to her credit, I think this is largely because of Michelle Rempel-Garner really highlighting some of these job postings that are for the temporary foreign workers program, but are ostensibly jobs that on the face of it look like they can be filled by regular Canadians. So if you're talking about like a manager at a Tim Hortons, for example, or somebody needing a fast food worker at like an en route in Ontario, which is, there are these little like road stops as you're driving along the highway. Like these are things that I think to a regular person, you're like, well, why do you, what? Like, isn't the youth unemployment super high? Like, why do we need, temporary foreign workers to fill some of these jobs? And I think, and the Conservatives also have to be careful here because to your point, you can't blow up the entire program because there are sectors that are quite dependent on it. So there is a needle to thread and there is a balance to, sort of achieve. But a lot of the headlines that come out of the temporary foreign workers program aren't good for the program itself, right? You hear a lot about, particularly in the agricultural side, a lot of exploitation for these laborers. They don't, when a big story erupts, it's not because they're treated perfectly well. It's because they're, tend to be kept in horrifying conditions. So that also, I think for a lot of Canadians, it's like, well, what's the point of this program?
So we're showing this Conservative release on my screen right now for the majority that are listening to this on the podcast. The Conservatives are calling straight up to end the temporary foreign worker program. Pierre Poilievre, and of course, as you mentioned, the Calgary MP, she's the shadow minister for immigration, Michelle Rempel-Garner, say that Carney has failed to meet his already excessive immigration targets, on track to issue the highest number of TFW permits ever in a single year. They say under the Liberals, too many corporations are relying on cheap foreign labor. Sounds like a Conservative government telling corporations what to do, by the way, which seems a little bit antithetical. But they say a 7.4% increase in employment insurance requests since Carney took office. They say 400,000 Canadians have been searching for work over 2 years, the highest share of long-term unemployment in about 27 years. They say youth employment is at its lowest in more than a quarter century outside the pandemic. Here's the thing, like real talk, I'm not 100% convinced that the 400,000 Canadians that are looking for work are standing in line outside the Tim Hortons locations when they're hiring, desperate for those jobs. I'm not sure that they're lining up to pick blueberries outside Abbotsford, BC. I'm not sure that they're lining up to help with harvest across the prairies. I mean, do you buy it?
I mean, I tend to take people at their word. So if folks who are unemployed are saying that, they are throwing their CVs into the lot and aren't getting callbacks, particularly if they are younger, right? Think about schools just getting back into session. Universities have just started right back up. I don't know if I was like a young kid, just graduated high school, maybe going into university, and I just came of voting age and I'm seeing that there's me and my friends can't really get gigs anywhere. That's the kind of thing that is going to piss me off, and I'm going to talk to my parents about it, and it's probably going to piss them off too. And then before you know it, you've got a critical mass of people that are pissed off at this program.
So what do you think is like, where can Carney find the sweet spot here that satiates criticism on that file, on the immigration file? Could the minister, Leonid Diab, in maybe a bit of a tough spot right here, because at the same time, you got to be able to provide enough labor. You got to be able to remove the barriers of the red tape to have enough labor for industry to happen, right? For the country to continue to function. So where do you find that sweet spot?
Yeah, look, a great question. Not an immigration expert or a labor expert. So I think those are questions that are probably better answers to those that are like, in the data, like all day, every day. But to give you like a kind of political pundity sort of answer, I think what Carney and, the rest of his front bench, in particular his immigration minister, need to avoid is the same sort of rhetoric that Carney got caught with a few weeks ago. I think it was during cabinet retreat, where he was asked specifically about the temporary foreign worker program. And I'm going to paraphrase his answer here, but it was something to the effect of, whenever he's speaking to business leadership, he hears of two things. One is tariffs, Trump tariffs looming and uncertainty, et cetera, et cetera. And the second thing that he hears is the need for temporary foreign workers. And I think that clip is going to likely be featured at some point quite heavily from the conservative benches to point out how out of touch he is from regular Canadians. Like, if you're going to use that example, then don't say business leadership. At least say like mom and pop store, or like, the local blueberry picking, like, to use your example, place, like farm or whatever. Like, this isn't, you have to be careful with your words, and you have to be mindful of the way the Conservatives and all of their digital proxies, right? Like the Canada Prouds, the Juno Newses, the Counter Signal, Rebel, whatever that's out there, how they're going to then like attack the Liberals for it, and how sometimes clips can be taken out of context. I'm not suggesting Mr. Carney was here, but I think they have to be mindful of that, and I don't know that they always are.
Yeah, I just want to let the audience know, by the way, these examples that I'm using when I'm talking about picking blueberries in Abbotsford, these are emails that we've got from, to the show, to talk at ryanjesperson.com. Listeners in particular across Western Canada that are letting us know how they tap into the program, and we invite people that are listening or watching that feel the opposite way about this. I mean, if there's a young person right now that feels like this program is a hurdle standing in the way of their gainful employment, or they're getting their career started, we want to hear from you as well in a comment on our YouTube episode, on Spotify, or of course to our email inbox. The Prime Minister, while invoking the word austerity a short time ago, which I think raised some eyebrows and certainly caught people's attention, has since clarified. I'll reference reporting in the Financial Post, Jordan Gowling, Carney's budget belt tightening may come with record deficits. He says that the trade negotiations with the U.S., tariffs are factoring into that big time, but says austerity may be a stretch. People are going to look at this and go, hang on a second. I thought the banker was supposed to get us back on track. What are you expecting budget to look like?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be good. And I think you've already seen the Liberals kind of try and set expectations. I wouldn't have used the word austerity myself,
right,
particularly because of how it's perceived in certain corners, especially Quebec. But I think, look, it's Carney and the Liberals laid out quite clearly that we were in this unprecedented sort of moment, right? And that we were in the middle of a crisis. And I fully accept that. However, if people's lives aren't getting easier, so if you have, Carney that is still in negotiations with the White House over what our, quote unquote deal is going to look like with America, and you've got an austerity budget, you've got a bunch of things like services and stuff that are cut, and then pepper in the fact that the cost of everyday items like groceries, kids' clothes, shoes, school supplies, whatever, gas, et cetera, are still quite unaffordable. People are going to direct that anger somewhere. And if you can't make the connection between, some of the investments that the Carney government is clearly going to make, like in the armed forces or in defense or in like resource extraction, like to the clip that you guys were playing of Premier Daniel Smith speaking quite, highly of the PM and quite hopeful of a deal. But if regular folks, as a whole, can't make the connection of the benefit to them or their community, again, that anger is going to be directed somewhere. And they're in a minority parliament still, the Liberals. I know they have a very large minority, but it's still a minority, and they have to govern as such. And at the first chance of any sort of weakness in the government's position, I think the opposition parties are going to strike.
Yeah, we'll talk about that relationship between Carney and Smith in a little bit, because I want to talk about the big nation-building projects. There was some hinting from Alberta's premier, though I'll acknowledge she didn't spell it out. I'm reading into it. But she says that Alberta and Ottawa are hoping to basically co-host a big announcement around Grey Cup. You love, by the way, how we're using all the Canadian mile markers now. Free trade in Canada by Canada Day, right? Big announcements by Grey Cup. Johnny was joking. We're going to have Victoria Day announcements. It's going to be great. But before we get there, language, always interesting. You say you may have hesitated to invoke the word austerity. I would feel the same thing if I was a speechwriter, but it's kind of interesting too, doesn't it? Doesn't it ring true that had it been a conservative prime minister or a conservative on the campaign trail, the word austerity not nearly as loaded. In fact, a lot of your voters might be looking for something like that, a commitment to like tightening the belt, trimming the fat, cutting spending. A little bit more difficult, I think, when you're a Liberal prime minister. But the fact of the matter is that spending's unsustainable. Like on the messaging front, it creates a unique challenge for Carney as well.
Yeah, 100,000%. I'm in full agreement. And I think, if you're talking about messaging, you can say that that's unsustainable. But then again, if you're a regular person and you're like, okay, that may be unsustainable, but then what are all these investments that are happening in, X sector or X portfolio, and how is that impacting me? And if you're not being helped by it, I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, so you referenced this short that we were playing earlier, so we'll let people know the show streams live weekdays at 8:30 Mountain, 10:30 Eastern, and we play our Real Talk pre-roll ahead of time. So typically between 8:20, 8:25, depending on how long they are, we play our 60 to 90-second highlights from the show the week before. Most people that watch us on YouTube, those that listen on the podcast, will not see or hear the pre-roll. That's exclusively for our live tuning guests. So I want to replay this. What you're going to hear right now is back-to-back exclusives. Last week, in our last 3 to 4 episodes. Big week here on Real Talk. One-on-one with the Prime Minister right here in studio, and then one-on-one with Alberta's Premier in response a couple of days later. And I'll be honest, I did not expect them to see getting along as famously as they appear to be getting along. But here's the story. Both sides of the coin.
I characterize it a little differently as opposed to demands and summits and a fight. I look at it as there's issues to be solved for Albertans, for Canadians. We want to grow jobs. We want to grow the economy, not just today, but 5 years out, 10 years out, put in place sustainable building blocks for prosperity for Albertans and for Canadians. That's what the Premier wants. That's what I want. It's what Albertans and what Canadians expect of their elected representatives.
You appear to be quite optimistic. After your meeting this week, you've said that you found unprecedented common ground, that you feel like Albertans are finally being heard. People aren't used to hearing an Alberta Premier talk like that, about a Liberal federal government for sure. What's going on?
We had a really long conversation where we're trying to go through what we've called the grand bargain and trying to find a pathway where we can get rid of the 9 bad laws that are impacting our investment climate, either replace them, repeal them, or substantially revise them, as well as get a bitumen pipeline. You need money to pay for everything. You can't just have cost. You also have to have new revenue. And so I would say that on that package of proposals that we're looking at, we're finding a lot of common ground. I'm looking forward to his next tranche of major projects announcements by Grey Cup on November the 16th. I would hope that we would be able to have a joint announcement by then. I think that there is some real demonstration that this Prime Minister understands, because he's got a big budget deficit he's facing. He's got a lot of aspirations on some of the social spending he wants to do. You simply can't do that by printing money. It causes inflation. It harms people's cost of living. The only way to do that is you've got to create more wealth and create more jobs. And the way you do that is you build more things. So I'm seeing a real difference from this Prime Minister to the previous one.
Is it fair to the previous one? He's talking about your former boss. He's talking about Trudeau, she is. But of course, a very different relationship at first glance, although it's early. What do you make of it? This is a pretty dramatic turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it's clear from the Premier's words as well as from the Prime Minister's words that they're working towards something. I don't think, Premier Smith is going to go out there and kind of float the idea of a Grey Cup announcement, joint announcement, or to tease that sort of thing if they weren't, making substantive moves to get to that point. So, I mean, I look forward to seeing the details. I'm curious about that'll look like. And I'm also curious what that means for the Liberals in Alberta. Does that mean that they will actually this time get credit for doing something? Because, the previous government didn't really with TMX. And it'll be interesting to me to see if there is an actual vibe shift, not just from the top, but that goes down and permeates down to the voter level.
Yeah, the whole credit thing, very interesting. And I guess it's just that, you sort of almost feel like, and it was kind of the same thing with Donald Trump and the Trudeau PMO, is just like when there was like almost like when it was personal, and it felt like the same thing with the province of Alberta, even the province of Saskatchewan. It didn't matter how many tens of billions of dollars the feds were going to dump into it. They weren't going to get credit for it. But I feel like when Carney touched on, Danielle Smith, like basically hours after he had been elected, it was like the next day, released these 9 demands. And we asked him about that in the interview. People can check it out. But he did reference those 9 things. And the premier basically comes on and says that she thinks, she references the list of 9 as well. It's kind of becoming this infamous list right now. It's like the Alberta firewall letter 25 years later, basically. But she says that she feels like they're making progress on all 9 of those items. I guess it's maybe when Alberta puts it out there for the nation to see and says, here's what we want, and then they start to get it. Then really, what are you supposed to say? The thing I wonder about is that as Alberta's premier has her own politicking to do and her own political career to worry about, you've got Alberta separatism kind of bubbling, kind of simmering here. I do feel like, by the way, like the sentiment's cooling down a little bit. And maybe that's part of the work of the federal government here. But she's got her base. She's obviously, as you know, there's the school library book thing that you and I discussed a couple of weeks ago. We've got the pronouns thing that's happening in schools and female athletes and in minor sports and school-related sports. Their parents have to sign a form about their sex or their gender at birth. I mean, all this kind of stuff's happening. That's a very different base, or that's very different messaging than talking about how great everything's going with the Liberal federal government, with the former governor of the Bank of Canada, this, et cetera, et cetera. It's a much different bit of messaging, and you kind of wonder, I don't know, it's like those old Westerns, like kind of the silly ones where, like it was like whoever it was riding the 2 horses with 1 foot on each side by side. And you kind of wonder, you know what I mean? If the horses start to veer away from each other, Supriya, we all know how that goes. No, but it might be a weird metaphor, but you have to agree it's very effective.
Yeah, it is. I started laughing, so yes.
That's all I'm hoping to do. But right, so it's a very interesting situation. Like, let's say maybe it's not a new bitumen pipeline like she's asking for, but maybe it has something to do with the emissions cap, or maybe it's like a big thing that Alberta's been asking for. I mean, that could be a game changer on a number of different fronts, including the relationship between Alberta and Ottawa, and that essentially kills the wind in the sails of the sovereigntists, doesn't it?
I mean, it does. The other thing it kind of makes it a lot more difficult is for conservatives, federal conservatives, especially federal conservatives from Alberta, to really criticize whatever the government announcement is going to be on this, right? Like, how are you going to hammer the Carney government for something where the very conservative premier of Alberta is coming out and they're going to say, no, this is actually good, guys, right? Like, so they've got to thread the needle here too.
Absolutely. We've got, by the way, some folks reporting on their kids' job hunts or young people on the TFW file, and kind of some interesting feedback. Alan, who's watching us live this morning on YouTube, what's up, Alan? Says he's a father of 8. Way to go, Alan. Says he says, you imagine that house? I can barely keep my eye on 2, Alan. How do you do it? He says, I'm a dad of 8. He says all of my kids are working or going to school and working part-time. Says one of my daughters is working at a local pub. He says they're always looking for help. So that's anecdotal. Want to make sure that the audience knows that if you're not joining us in our live chat, powered by Park Power, we're always looking for your feedback. Supriya, hang tight. I want to check in with you on like 100 other things. But first, I want to make sure we get in a couple of important messages, including what's happening tomorrow with our friends at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. But again, if you're listening to this on your commute or while you're walking your dog, if you're putting some thoughts together in your mind, make sure you send those to us in an email. You could hear it read on a future show. That address, talk@ryanjesperson.com.
Edmonton is here because the river is here. So we care for it, protect it, share it. The water of the North Saskatchewan sustains all of us. It's a big job to treat and deliver it, river to tap, to over 1 million people. So you can have and enjoy a glass of the Sask. On tap, made local by Epcor.
Friends, I want to make sure that Athabasca University is on your radar. This is the time of year where there's a lot of talk about back to school for obvious reasons. But as you know, if you've been regularly tuning into the show, Athabasca University is Canada's open university, is offering world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. AU is designed to fit your life. For ambitious people across Canada and beyond, Athabasca U offers flexible approaches to higher education. You could go online today at athabascau.ca, learn more about how it works, but maybe you don't end up getting your application until October or November. Maybe you're not on track to start until December or January or even February. It doesn't matter. You're setting the pace of your studies. It is flexible and it's different from other universities by design. AU is Canada's leader in accessible, flexible, equitable, and personalized education. You can browse their programs and courses today online at athabascau.ca. Our friends at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce bracing for a big day coming up on the 16th of September. That's Tuesday of this week. If you're listening when we're doing the shows, their 56th annual Edmonton Chamber Golf Tournament set to go at the Quarry. This is a full day of networking, friendly competition, and soaking up that September sunshine on one of Edmonton's best courses. They've still got room for a couple of foursomes. If you go onto their website, that's edmontonchamber.com, you can browse their events link. You can learn more about it there. Or, of course, you can just reach out to them directly. Have you subscribed? Have you followed them on Instagram yet, by the way? They're doing a great job there. Kudos to the team at the Edmonton Chamber for a packed house on their Edmonton mayoral candidates debate. Of course, the Edmonton Chamber is always working on advocating for Edmonton and area businesses. Do your business a favor. Explore the benefits of membership at edmontonchamber.com. And we want to make sure on your radar, a very special episode of Real Talk is coming up. The very next one, right after we talk to Supriya, the 16th of September, we present a special Real Talk Roundtable featuring the remarkable team at UCAN Youth Services. You're going to hear from their executive director. You're going to hear from a couple of their program managers, but I'm telling you right now, the most powerful voice around our roundtable is going to be this young man, a graduate of UCAN's employment placement program. This guy has been swimming against the stream. This guy has been fighting for an open door since his early teenage years. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a powerful story. You will not want to miss a special episode of the show. That's the 16th of September, featuring the team at UCAN Youth Services, our charity of choice for 2025-26. A nonprofit organization helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. If you know a young person that could tap into UCAN and see their life transformed, make sure you check out their website. That's ucan.ca. Supriya Dwivedi, our guest in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, the first episode of every week. Supriya, we don't have to spend all episode on it, but of course I wanted to talk to you about the murder, the assassination of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. We've learned a lot more about the suspect, about the accused in this case, and obviously I think some twists and turns along the way. There's a number of different angles we can take with this, including reaction by mainstream media in Canada, the United States, and around the world. I want to talk to you about freedom of speech. I want to talk to you about what university campuses need to represent, but we've had a few days to think about it now, coming up on a week. Where's your head at with all of this?
I mean, to your point, we have had a bunch of information that's come to light, but we still don't know motive.
Yeah.
And yet, for some reason, we have almost completely accepted that this was an act of, political violence stemming from the left, when we have almost zero evidence to support this notion. Like, all current publicly available information is pointing to the fact that the shooter was terminally online and was like a hardcore gamer who came from a, relatively conservative family that had quite a, which gave him like ready access to guns. None of that makes the death of Charlie Kirk any less tragic. He was 31 years old and had two very small kids and was publicly assassinated in front of a bunch of college kids. That's as tragic as it gets, right? Like, his wife was apparently in the audience and perhaps with one of their young children. Like, I can't even imagine what those who are close to him personally have had to go through in this, particularly when The video was readily available, even if
Yeah.
you were not looking for it online. I ended up in my feed a bunch, and because of autoplay, like just automatically, the last few seconds of his life were, broadcast. And so I don't know why we've jumped on this. I don't know why we're just, really accepting what was very clearly an inorganic campaign, trying to position this as some sort of act of leftist violence. And it also really does ignore a huge aspect of this, which is that Charlie Kirk was very disliked by people on the far, far right, right? Like, think about folks like Laura Loomer and Nick Fuentes. They've been targeting Charlie Kirk for quite a bit. And if you consider that he was, Kirk, to his credit, was one of the last MAGA folks, if not the one and only last remaining MAGA person out there that was still calling for the full release of the Epstein files. There are a lot of layers here, and I don't know why mainstream media, as well as our political class, is really jumping on this narrative that this was somehow a political disagreement.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think we're in a day and age right now. You're talking, I'm not about to say anything profound here. It's just a fact. You talk about your social media feeds. Johnny and I got into this earlier. Johnny, I'm trying to remember the wording you used, but you basically said, like, you were saying in theory, John, you had not granted permission. You had not personally signed up to watch, I think you described it almost as a snuff video, like to watch a murder on your social media. It just kind of slapped you in the face.
Yeah, it's a little wild these days that, like, you don't, there's no gatekeeping of that anymore. Whereas before, I mean, we were talking about this maybe even like 10 years ago, you had to go in the depths of, like, the dark web or like a site to a link to Reddit to another link, and then you open it and it gives you a warning. And now today,
you're like seeking it out.
The way we both saw it is, obviously we were going to look, on X and different places to see, what the latest reporters and media were saying about it. But immediately, the very first thing I saw was a 5-second clip. I didn't even have time to decide whether I wanted to see it. I saw it.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. And then, so Supriya, you've got this kind of like culture that we've all manifested, this culture that we've essentially called for, where everybody wants the scoop, everybody wants the update, everybody's prepared to provide the insights, right? And you see, I mean, the obvious conclusion early on is that it's, the lazy but obvious immediate conclusion is that, he's a right-wing organizer. He's a prominent, very prominent and influential Republican. It's got to be somebody that opposes Trump. It's got to be somebody that opposes the Republicans. Turns out that in theory, or at least family adjacent to the alleged killer, that's certainly not the case. Then we hear about etching or inscribing on the shells or on the bullet casings, and then all of a sudden people start to go, wow, maybe it was like a trans shooter, or maybe it was this, and it's just swerving all over the place on what's verified. The FBI making a note within the last 24 hours that the accused, or at least the suspect here, I should say, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson of Utah, is not cooperating with police. Kash Patel, FBI director, writing that the suspect in the killing wrote a note saying that he had an opportunity to take out an activist and that he was going to take that opportunity. The message written prior to Wednesday's shooting. Of note, by the way, American Vice President J.D. Vance has confirmed he will host the Charlie Kirk podcast at noon today, Monday, as last week's assassination continues to roil the country, reports CNN. This quest, this desire for immediate information leaves a lot of the very basic journalistic principles at risk of being completely ignored.
Yeah, by, large newsrooms, right? Like, it's one thing if you're an independent startup media org and you have perhaps in the haste of trying to report something, you make an error and then you put out an editor's note that you made the error, okay? Like, but if you're the Wall Street Journal, if you're the Guardian, and you're out here putting out what is, very questionable information, and then you have to put out an editor's note retracting all of that information, which is what both of those papers had to do. I think, it really starts to put the question as to what is the point of having a huge newsroom with all these resources if you're going to make sloppy errors like this in a time that everything is super politically charged and everyone has to be quite, careful with their words. And I'm not saying that from a free speech perspective. I'm saying that from a information perspective in terms of you got to be careful of what you're putting out there so that you're not putting out wrong information that can then be used by bad actors. And even though the Guardian and the Wall Street Journal did issue corrections, I mean, how many people saw those corrections compared to the initial reporting? And how many people, once they realized that there were, pretty big errors in both of those outlets reporting, that it changed their mind or that it was, adding to a false narrative. So it's just like, everyone needs to do a little bit better.
Yeah, I think this was the first time we saw actual media saying things like, I mean, Supriya, you saw this stuff. His father's a sheriff. He's a Trump supporter. That was shown to be like a Photoshop. He wore a Trump costume on Halloween. And now we're hearing he has a trans girlfriend. It's actually a roommate. Like, we don't know anything yet. You know what I mean? It's all up in the air.
So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but Johnny's right. We don't really know anything yet. And look, Americans can do whatever the heck it is that they want to do. It's their country. It's their political discourse. Go ahead. What really irks me is the fact that we've got Canadian politicians, including sitting conservative politicians like Andrew Scheer, that are using this moment to go after those who they think are, undeserving of, I guess, basic norms. He's gone after Rachel Gilmore pretty hard, who's an independent journalist. And I don't know, it's absolutely kind of batshit insane that he would put a target on her back like that. But Andrew Scheer has done that before to female conservative to female liberal senators or independent senators. And he's doing it again with Rachel Gilmore. And the Conservative Party has a habit of this. And then, sort of turning around and claiming like that they're trying to dial down the temperature. And to add to that, I don't think I've seen any English mainstream media cover the fact that Rachel Gilmore has been, since this whole thing of Andrew Scheer putting a target on her back, has ended up like in the crosshairs of the far, far right that are really going after her with respect to now having to deal with police and death threats. French media covered it. Why didn't English media?
Well, why do you think?
I think because English media in this country is particularly bad on the legacy side of things. And I don't think their newsrooms understand the internet or the, far reaches of it, nor do I think that they want to understand it. So you get a bunch of people that are, kind of old, don't understand the current information environment, don't understand the way the platform-based internet works, don't understand the way like gamer culture or terminally online meme culture works. And so they just go out there and they make these giant pronouncements that are false and that are, misinforming the Canadian public.
Yeah. The Tyee has an interesting piece. Jen St. Denis and David Beers have co-written it. People can read it at thetyee.ca. The headline, The Dangerous Targeting of a Canadian Journalist. You don't typically see in a story, and I will lament the fact, Supriya, that we see stories around targeting of journalists all too often around the world, but we very rarely see them in the context of a former candidate for prime minister, of a former leader of the official opposition, of a high-profile MP as the one who's doing the targeting. But that's exactly what happened. And Johnny and I got into it last week. People can check out those episodes. But, I mean, for people that aren't familiar with the story, Gilmore wrote, she posted that she was concerned that some fans of Charlie Kirk on the far right who are, quote, aching for more violence could turn this into an even more radicalizing moment. I don't think it's that controversial or that hot of a take, respectfully.
Of course it's not.
She says what they now believe their fears to have been proven right. They have a right to retaliate no matter who is behind the actual shooting. Legitimate point. And then the Conservative MP, who wanted to be prime minister, reposts her comments from his official account, calling her twisted, saying she had so much hate on her. Like, I guess I'm not asking you what Andrew Scheer was thinking because I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me that you have no idea, but what on earth?
I mean, no, I actually think this is exactly what he meant to do. I think when the Conservatives go after whoever it is that they're putting in their crosshairs, this time it was Rachel Gilmore, it was very on purpose. It wasn't an accident. This is what he wanted, and this is what he got. When he went after those two female senators, about a year ago. This is they ended up with lots of death threats. That's what happens when you do this. He took her comments and then claimed them to be much more, dramatic or much more offensive than what they actually were. Rachel, by the way, is now proven right, to your point, because of the way everything has played out. And I think Andrew Scheer owes her a huge apology. And so do everybody else that ended up retweeting his comments. Mrs. Poilievre ended up retweeting his comments, as did a number of conservative MPs and activists and party leaders. Why are they doing that?
I don't know. Doesn't the call have to come from inside the house? That's kind of misapplying the trope. But don't the calls to be better have to come from conservatives? Don't they have to come from his supporters? Like in the sense of like his comments, let me talk lazy, let me talk generally, let me paint with a big broad brush. Like if his comments enrage the left, isn't it kind of mission accomplished? Like if conservative voting Canadians, if reasonable, respectable people who happen to vote conservative want their party to take the high road in situations like this, don't they have to let their elected representatives know?
I mean, they do. However, to our earlier conversation, they have to know that it's happening. And right now, if you're an English speaker in Canada, you don't know that this kind of harassment of a journalist by a sitting Conservative MP, one who tried to be prime minister, is actually going on. Because other than, if you're tuning into us, fine, sure, right? If, or heard you and Johnny talking about it last week. But if you get your news from like the mainstream 6 o'clock news or whatever it is, and then you're reading one of the major papers, you don't know about any of this. You don't know about any of the ties that are, or all of the different factions that are at play in these online spaces that are quite dark. And I think that does a general disservice to all of us, because how are you going to make decisions if you're not fully informed about, in the lead up to that?
I was listening to Scott Galloway, Prof G, and Kara Swisher last night, and he was saying, he was talking about somebody very close to him, begging him to cancel his public appearances this week in light of what had happened and the temperature being cranked up. Sounded like maybe a family member of his. He didn't articulate, but bigger picture, like how does this change the game? How does this change the landscape? Like when it comes to availability, people are talking about metal detectors on U.S. college campuses now. I think that, I don't know. Let me not assume, but I will for a second, that you and I probably both believe the university campuses need to be home, need to foster, need to almost curate sort of like respectful disagreements, challenging dialogue. You should hear things that piss you off at a university as you sort of like the frontal cortex develops and as you form your opinions. But I don't know. This sort of seems to take it next level, right? This is a guy who rose to prominence, Charlie Kirk did, in a number of ways, but number one, by hitting college campuses, university campuses, setting up a fold-out table and taking on impromptu debates, which while I may not appreciate everything he had to offer, I can appreciate the guts that it takes to do that. Sometimes he got owned, or at least the short clips showed it that way. Sometimes he owned the libs or the progressives, and it was very effective in building his audience. But I don't know that, something like this happens. It could happen again, and I don't know that the average, not the average, but let me say more prominent people on the left or the right are going to want to sign up for that anymore. What does it do to discourse? What does it do to political division?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously bad. Like, I don't think you want a bunch of people considering their public appearances and factoring in whether or not they can be, publicly assassinated, right? Yeah. Like that's a very bad place for any society to go, especially one that prides itself on open debate and discourse. And even if you don't necessarily agree with your opponent, you at least come together to sort of hash it out, and then you can make your own sort of conclusions. But I think it's obviously very chilling, and it's quite dangerous. But I would also say that, you pointed out metal detectors on college campuses. I mean, I don't know the full map or the full blueprint of the university where this happened, but all of the reporting seems to be that the shooter was something like 200 yards away. It was from an elevated position. In this situation, like, would a metal detector even have gotten him? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's wild, right? Like, and you just even look like in the state of Utah. Like, do you expect it to happen in Utah? Do you expect it to happen there? There's all these, and I don't want to necessarily. It might be too early to call them conspiracy videos. I don't know, but people are looking at the video like shot beside stage when Kirk's sitting there, and the people that are allegedly doing the arm signals and the hand signals and this, that, and the other, and suggesting it could have been a coordinated attack, suggesting that there's going to be like Charlie Kirk truthers that are going to believe that it was Donald Trump that ordered this to be carried out. I mean, it's just an absolutely wild development.
There's a huge faction on the internet right now that thinks this was a hit put out by Israel. So like, there's the conspiracy theorists are already conspiracy theorying right now. Like, they're doing it.
Let me bring this back to Canada. I know it's very interesting to like read from people. Let me read a comment here from Aaron, who's watching us now. Our Canadian audience, Supriya, which is obviously the lion's share of our audience, although we do welcome our American friends that tune in. But Erica says right now, over the weekend, hundreds of thousands of people gathering at vigils, stores looted, 0, cop cars destroyed, 0, rocks thrown, 0, police officers assaulted, 0, chants and calls for violence, 0. I can pick up on the point that she's making, right?
There's been lots of calls for violence against the left.
I've seen a lot of people tweeting that this means war, that it's time to go. But I mean, just feel like even with this audience, there's a lot of people that are I mean, even moderating the live chat over the past 2 days was a wild ride for Johnny, right? You've got people that are cheering the assassination. You've got people that are furious to see it. I think that it's going to obviously take some time for this to settle. But to be quite honest with you, and I'm not saying this as a talk show host to try to whip people up into a frenzy, but I'm extremely concerned about what something like this does, because now you've got a martyr. Although I guess it also depends, doesn't it, on the motivation of the shooter, whether you could actually apply the word martyr. I think you can most definitely apply the word assassination, and it is domestic terrorism no matter which way you slice it. And I know that this type of thing, like any other story like this, spills over into Canada and has an effect like that. Not to suggest that a copycat would pull something off, heaven forbid, like this in Canada. But no doubt people are going to be paying close attention. For example, as parliamentarians, as MPs return to the House of Commons today to see what the tone, to see what the tenure's like, to see how Poilievre and Carney are going to go toe-to-toe, to see if there's a higher sort of a calling or if they can raise that bar like politicians always promise they will. But to be quite honest with you, I'm expecting just as much nastiness as we saw between Poilievre and Justin Trudeau. You just wrote a piece in the Star. It's just out that Mark Carney is not who he said he was. Great Chicago Bears clip. Great reference on the heels of week 2 at the NFL. But what's your argument for those that haven't read it yet?
I mean, look, I don't choose my own headline, right? So I just want to put that out there.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I would have gone with, well, the real Mark Carney, please stand up.
Oh,
but
good.
Anyway, yeah, I think the gist of it for folks who haven't read it, it's on the Star website right now. It is that this whole talk of like the rupture of our relationship between us and the U.S. Kind of rings hollow when you take into account just how batshit parts of the Strong Borders Act is, which is Bill C-2, which basically allows for all sorts of warrantless information to be handed over to U.S. law enforcement, including health data, which could include reproductive health data. I don't think that's good. And I don't think the folks that voted for Carney would think that's good. I think the criticism to the bill has been somewhat muted thus far. And I'm quite looking forward to seeing how this bill progresses, because I think as you get a few civil society folks making some noise, some privacy experts, privacy lawyers that are going to start to ringing the alarm on this, it's going to be hard for the Carney government to defend this. And I mean, how are you saying that the economic and security partnership is over and it's completely, it's donezo and we're in a crisis and we have to rethink everything? And then meanwhile, we're okay handing over all sorts of warrantless data to the U.S.? Like, come on.
What's your assessment of what this government's going to get done? I mean, I'm asking you, this is just pure prognostication. Nobody bet your life savings on this. But there seems to be almost two outcomes that Canadians are talking about. You hear about like when we're talking about charities coming up on like Giving Tuesday or after the holiday season, and people talk about like donor exhaustion. And I read an interesting piece the other day where people were talking about like at some point Canadians, it was David Moscrop that wrote it, Canadians could grow tired of endless concessions to the United States to get deals done. And we're seeing them all over the place. I mean, the Paris Agreement's an interesting development, by the way. But so you got Canadians at some point, and I would imagine more and more as the weeks or months go on, saying, well, how important actually is the deal with the U.S.? They're our number one trading partner. Geographically, there's nobody more important. There's huge military implications here, but there is the possibility that a significant agreement doesn't actually get done.
Yeah, and I mean the goalposts have already shifted, right? Like initially, this was going to be some tariff-free deal, analogous to what we had with the NAFTA 2.0 negotiation, right? Like wherein the vast majority of our goods are exempt, and that's the way it was going to go. And then, as the summer dragged on, as the Liberal government missed their own self-imposed August 1st deadline, you started hearing the language from the government start to shift quite dramatically in that we should no longer expect a deal that is tariff-free, because if you look at all of the other deals that have been made with various allies, they all come with some baseline level of tariff involvement. And I think for Canadians that elected a guy that was, largely won based on the fact of his ability to go toe-to-toe with Trump and how to manage a country during an economic crisis, you gotta show for it. And until people start feeling relief or start seeing some sort of developments that are in the positive direction, it's going to get harder and harder for the government to maintain, I think, certain positions as well as maintain their high riding in the polls.
Supriya Dwivedi hanging out with us. Got to ask you this before you go. The Ontario Liberals holding their AGM, and they have this question. It's kind of a weird way they ask the question, but you're looking for, as the leader, you're looking for a high number when they ask you, should the Ontario Liberals hold a leadership review? Some within the party were saying that there needed to be a 66% or higher vote result. In other words, 2/3 of party members said, no, we do not need to hold a leadership review. In fact, it was 57%, about 10% below the bare minimum. So Bonnie Crombie, Ontario Liberal leader, has confirmed that she will step down as the leader, which will prompt the third leadership race for the Ontario Liberals since 2020. How did they get to this point? Where did she drop the ball? And where do the Ontario Liberals go from here?
Look, I think there's no point in picking apart a campaign that's already passed and seeing yet another majority for Doug Ford, right? I don't want to kick the folks down when they're already down that worked hard on the campaign. I think Bonnie did the best she could, and it wasn't good enough for the leadership review. I think she did the right thing in stepping down. If I was advising her, I would have advised her to have a resignation speech prepped at the convention when she didn't, achieve the number that they were hoping for. But whatever, she resigned. Now it's over. Now the Liberals are going to look forward to a leadership race. I think there are a few names that we should probably expect. I'm looking to see whether there are any federal current sitting MPs that want to throw their hat in the ring.
Quit winking and being all coy. Who are you talking about? Spell it out for us on the prairies.
Oh, well, there was, I think, a former cabinet minister who's now an MP in Ontario and Toronto who ran for Liberal leader the last time around, and I would bet that he is probably raring to go for a second round.
It's Monday. I don't have it. You got to just say...
It's Nate Erskine.
Thank you. Nate Erskine Smith. He wanted to decriminalize all drugs. That was kind of one of the big things for those of us out west that were paying attention to stories that kind of glean the national headlines for that. How would you describe his politics? Is he like progressive with a capital P?
I'd say he's pragmatic. I consider him progressive. Look, I think he's certainly left of center. I think he's probably left of Bonnie, but I think that also means he comes to the table with progressive solutions for a lot of the things that are ailing Ontario. Our healthcare system sucks. Okay, to find a family doctor is like a near impossible feat, which I realize it is in many other parts of the country. Surgical wait times haven't gotten any, significantly lower. The wait time for specialists hasn't gotten any lower. The Ford government is trying to take over public education by firing trustees or withholding their power for a bunch of school boards. Like there's a bunch of things at play that I think a real fiery progressive with good comms and good policy can, start to make some serious dents in the Doug Ford kingdom that we're currently living in.
I'll acknowledge that any politician is beatable. I'm best with sports metaphors, and the easiest one is that once Wayne Gretzky was traded, anybody could be traded. So any politician can lose an election. But Doug Ford, like you just said it yourself, you're like yet another majority. It's just like back to back to back. Appears to be perennially, or at least consistently in polling, one of Canada's more popular premiers. Got a lot of credit for advocating for Ontario when it came to the tariff war. Had a pretty solid photo op the other day, dumping out the big 60 of Crown Royal, minus the slow pour that you and I were laughing about. Can the Ontario Liberals really make a go at this guy, or is he in a situation, one of those kind of premier seats where you go, gosh, this guy could have this job for as long as he wanted it, or at least for a long time? Where's your head at there?
I think there's a bunch of inroads that the Liberals could make. They have to actually try and swing, though. And I think that's part of the problem, is that so often when you are up against a very popular conservative leader, one who is progressive conservative, right, and who tends to appeal to folks that are in that center space, both on the left of center and on the right of center, it's difficult, but I think it can be done. And I think that there are a lot of, issues to go directly and hit directly at the Ford government. And you need somebody who wants to swing, who wants to take a punch and isn't okay with just getting clobbered in the face constantly. And I think whoever wins the Ontario Liberal leadership race will end up having those qualities. And I think it should be somebody who's, a little bit younger, can feel the pain that young families are feeling, and really, really make the message that has your life under Doug Ford gotten better over these last, few years. By the time we go to an election, people have had two majority governments. Has it been better? I don't know. I don't think so.
It's been the question of North American elections over the past 15 or 20 years, hasn't it? I mean, that's essentially, when it all comes down to it, even if it is like a referendum on the carbon tax or a referendum on a certain person's, or who can best negotiate with the United States or what have you, it always comes back to that. That's the question. Has your life been better under the incumbent? I mean, that's always the question. It's always so good to see your face. Already looking forward to next week, my friend, next Monday. Thanks for making time for us, as always.
Always a pleasure, Ryan.
You got it. That's Supriya Dwivedi, formerly of the PMO. Make sure you read her work in the Toronto Star. Mark Carney, not who he said he was. And we want to give you a quick heads up, by the way. When Supriya joins us next Monday, that'll be the 22nd of September, she will be followed by a candidate that has a decent shot at being the next mayor of Calgary. They've got some new polling out. We've been made privy to some numbers. Sonia Sharp is in the mix. She's an incumbent. She's a Calgary councillor, and Sonia Sharp will join us on the back nine of next Monday's episode. That's the 22nd of September coming up. This conversation has been made possible in part by our friends at Play Alberta, and I want to talk to you about how Alberta wins with Play Alberta. I'm showing you their website right now, playalberta.ca. Not only is this the most safe and secure way to bet casino, sports, and lottery online, not only does all revenue go right back to the province. That's big, by the way. If you're going to have a little fun, if you're going to place a wager on something, why not do it on the platform where the profits are going back into your home province to charities in the province of Alberta? But also, Albertans are winning big every single day. 10, 50, even as much as $100,000 is won daily on Play Alberta. They've even made millionaires. And best of all, for a limited time only, new players can receive a $1,000 casino bonus. You can download the Play Alberta app anywhere you get your apps. Check out all the great offers and get started today. Don't forget, Thursdays on Real Talk, Play Alberta presents Alberta Wins, a good news story featuring the province that we're very proud to call home. That's Alberta Wins, presented by Play Alberta. You know, proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. That's Friesen Brothers, celebrating 70 years in 2025. I know that a few of you, because you wrote into the show to tell us, enjoyed that Filipino feast that they had going on just this last weekend at select locations. At all of their locations right now, the Alberta Beef Roundup is underway. Since inception, Friesen Brothers has been helping Alberta communities and families fill their freezers with quality Alberta beef. This is now a 60-pound pack of real Alberta beef. As the tradition continues, expertly cut and wrapped by their in-store butchers and freezer ready for you. You can order online by going to order.friesen.com. That's order.freson.com. You pick your favorites. You choose a date and a time to pick it up, and their butchers will have it all ready for you at one of their 16 different Alberta locations. Order now. You got to get it in by September 28th. Again, you can find out more details at Friesen.com. Our friends at California Closets, the best in the business, bar none. No small print, no caveats. There's no debate when it comes to custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. Make the most of your space with California Closets custom organizational systems. Saw a beautiful California Closets installation in a beautiful loft condo just the other day. They had integrated an electric fireplace into a wet bar setup with a TV. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely stunning. They can do the same for your laundry room, your boot room, your primary bedroom, that dream walk-in closet you've always wanted. And if you're grumbling right now, saying there's no way I could afford California Closets, think again. They can custom design to your budget, all the details, and that form to request a free consultation on their website. That's californiaclosets.ca. Our friends at North Road Investment Council reminding you that this is a great time of year as everybody gets back into their routine to take a look at how your career and retirement goals are progressing. At North Road Investment Council, they're working with Canadians that have built successful careers. Now you want to ensure that your wealth is being organized to deliver a successful retirement. The typical North Road client comes from an analytical or detail-driven profession. They work with a lot of architects and engineers and those in the healthcare profession. With at least $2 million in investable assets, if you're interested in seeing how that course is plotted out to accommodate life's unforeseen challenges, a strategic approach to wealth management that aligns with your vision, connect with North Road Investment Council today on their website, northroadic.com. In particular, check out their digital risk advisory services. Just one of the many things that sets them apart. That's North Road Investment Council, online at northroadic.com. I see here Blas Sheep in our live chat. I want to recognize Blas Sheep. I got your email. Sent me a big long one with a lot of research done in there. Johnny had passed along like 5 or 6 different links and said, can you please play all of these Charlie Kirk links? He said he's being misrepresented by everybody. Yeah. And I appreciate the email, Blas Sheep. Goes into our live chat, though, and says, Rachel Gilmore is an extremist. Says her first comment was, oh no, what will the right side do, instead of being a compassionate human being? Could have just not commented at all. I mean, she's a commentator. And I didn't find her comments to be particularly egregious. I thought that they were bang on. She says that she's concerned that somebody could act in retribution because Charlie Kirk got murdered. I don't think that that's an incredibly contentious or polarizing or divisive take. I understand if you don't love Rachel Gilmore. I would also suggest, let's reserve the word. Much like Nazi and fascist and communist, let's save extremist for when it applies.
Yeah.
Right? Extremists are people that drive pickup trucks through abortion clinic windows. Extremists are people that blow themselves up at events. I'm not making light of any of this. Extremists are people that in cold blood murder people with whom they disagree. An extremist is not somebody who's built a big online following for being cheeky and intuitive and insightful and is a media entrepreneur and has positions you don't agree with. Let's reserve extremist for when it really fits. Because if we start calling people like Rachel Gilmore or maybe you don't like me, or maybe you don't like some other Canadian commentator that has views different than yours, then what are we going to call the people that go shoot up schools and rallies?
Yeah, it happens on both sides. Like there seems to be this wall where, like,
100%.
You know, the left does this or the right does this. You know, I could name, Rachel Gilmore's an activist. Well, I could call a bunch of people on the right activists too, who someone would say, oh no, they're
Charlie
reasonable.
Kirk was an activist.
They're reasonable. They have common sense. And in regard to the clips, Bloss Sheep, yeah, there are a lot, and you're seeing them more now. They're edited beautifully, and they've got music, and they show, the decent side, I guess you would say, of Charlie Kirk. But he's got 15 years of uploaded videos that we have definitely looked through, and there is a lot of troubling stuff there, no matter how you want to edit it and clip it. I've watched live video from his rallies that is unedited where, there's things I'm like are blatantly, some of it I would classify as hate speech or right on the line. There are other times where he's talking about stats and things, and he's framing it like I just one I remember that he constantly brought up in debates was, 55% of murders in the United States are by black people when they're only 13% of the population. But that stat is it's so juiced up because, he's referring to when a suspect is identified in a murder. I think the stats are only going back to like 2018 is the earliest or the latest we have. 55% of the time it's a black person, but he's also like grazing right over the fact that like there's so many things involved with that. Police present in black communities, being the first one, and poverty and segregation and a ton of other things. And it doesn't mean 55% of people charged, convicted, and in jail for murder are black people. It's just it's very. These debates that happen in public forums, especially on college campuses with young people, there's so much that you would have to go through and fact check. And, maybe there needs to be more adults there, but then that will get even probably into bigger arguments. But yeah, we haven't played either side. We haven't played good Charlie Kirk clips. We haven't played bad Charlie Kirk clips since any of this happened. And we're not going to.
We're not trying to, I'm not trying to, and this is not, it shouldn't be the goal, I don't think, of any show or any discussion around this, in that we're not trying to if you're playing a bunch of clips of him sounding like a real piece of shit, then what are you trying to do? Are you trying to say he deserved it? Are you trying to say he earned his fate? Are you trying to say it was justified? And if you're trying to play all these clips of him being like a wonderful family man and a father and a Bible-believing evangelical, then what are you trying to do? Are you sort of trying to ignore all the other stuff that he said? I know this is a lot of you were posting about the black pilot thing. Like that was one of the recurring clips that I saw all the time when he was talking about DEI and basically saying every time I see a black pilot now, I'm wondering are they qualified? That's a pretty bullshit take. And that's one of many. So we could do this. I could curate a whole show that makes him sound like just an incredible humanitarian, and we could curate a whole show that makes him sound like the worst human to ever walk the face of planet Earth. That's not our goal. I think everybody understands what he was all about, what made him tick. We're all about kind of common sense takes here on the show, and I think the common sense takes are that he built an enormous audience and had a hugely influential position with America's conservative Republican movement. That's a fact. He said a lot of things that got people going. He was an intelligent entrepreneur. He understood audience building. That's a big part of what all of this is. Our audience would be 10 or 100 times the size if we went and had a lot of the takes and said a lot of the things that he said. I'm sure. I have no doubt about it. And on the flip side, like I said, I'm not trying to lionize him either. We're just having a realistic conversation about the role that he played in the election, the role that he was going to play in political dialogue in the United States over the next, who knows, John, 30, 40 years. I don't know. You never know what the shelf life is for somebody like that. But the fact of the matter is he was murdered. The world is talking about it. We have very few insights now. The FBI saying that the accused, or I keep saying the accused, the suspect in this shooting, is not cooperating with police. And so I think a lot of people, and it's understandable, it's very understandable that people want answers. They want to know exactly why the killer killed. They want to know exactly why Charlie Kirk was the target. What was he hoping to accomplish? People want those insights. We don't have them now. Ms. B is fairly saying to me, and sometimes I guess some people, even the fact that I'm using the word assassination, we got a couple notes from people last week that were like, this does not qualify technically as an assassination. I'm going to call it an assassination. It was an assassination in my mind, but by definition, Ms. B pushes back when I said domestic terrorism. Maybe I did cross the line there. She says, no, technically, it's not really an example of domestic terrorism. The definition of it is not that. Let's get it. This is kind of an interesting debate. We won't spend 60 minutes on this. But domestic terrorism refers to acts of violence or threats of violence by individuals or group motivated by domestic, political, religious, social, racial, or environmental ideologies with the aim of intimidating the public or coercing a government. Perpetrators typically from the same country as the target, distinguishing it from international terrorism. The acts primarily carried out within the country's borders. She follows up and says, there's a term that's being used to describe Kirk and his rhetoric, and it was an interesting topic to explore. Ms. B says, so I invite everybody to look into it too. Is it stochastic terrorism? Stochastic terrorism, I've never heard of this, describes the use of mass media by influential figures to indirectly incite anonymous actors to commit acts of violence against a targeted group or individual. Language used intentionally vague, coded, or dehumanizing, providing plausible deniability for the instigator while creating a climate where violence becomes statistically more likely, though individual instances are unpredictable. This form of indirect enabling of terror, often referred to as the lone wolf phenomenon, presents challenges for legal prosecution. I don't know. I'm not sure that I feel like, I get on one hand, I've never heard a clip, and I was like not a huge Charlie Kirk fan. I'm going to be honest with you. It's a shocking story. It punched me in the gut, like I think many of you. I know it punched you in the gut when we heard what had happened. It's horrific. It's deplorable. It's unacceptable. There's no doubt about that. But I've not read or heard his entire body of work, I'm being honest with you, but I will say two things. I've never seen a clip where I believe that Charlie Kirk indirectly or otherwise was inciting violence. At the same time, when you turn up the temperature, when you crank up the temperature, when you imply certain things about certain minorities, traditionally marginalized communities, when you pour gas on that fire, when you flame that rhetoric, I don't think it's also that outrageous to draw direct lines between people that take your work as God speak and then act on their strong feelings about it. So let's call this a gray area. I appreciate, Ms. B, you throwing that into the mix so we can debate it.
First of all, assassination, the literal meaning is murder by secret or sudden attack for political reasons. So it was an assassination. Let's just get down to it. But also, like, Charlie said stuff like Trump did, kind of, back when they stormed the parliament. He'd use phrases like, war is here, arm yourself.
Right.
So, like, not directly calling for violence, but a lot of buzzwords all the time, right?
Yeah. So listen, this story is like, it is what it is. I know that I take that back. I don't mean that to sound calloused. I'm just saying, like, we only have the information we have right now is what I mean. I know that everybody wants more insights. I know that it's still shocking for a lot of you. Ran into people. I'm sure that you and I will chat about our Morgan Wallen experience over the weekend.
Oh man,
we had 50 people in here after the concert in our studio in Mercer Warehouse. Amazing show. Yeah. But there were people that were like one. I'm not going to say who they were, but like one person was in here and she was emotional about Charlie Kirk's murder, and there were people that were kind of like much less emotional. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So I know that people feel differently about it. It is okay. And we'll talk about it. We're not going to talk about it every single show, but I wanted to make sure that we got into it with Supriya. That Morgan Wallen show, I know there was back-to-back, you and I both on the Friday show.
Friday was a better show, people. I'm not going to lie. Connor McDavid walking out. Although I will say, Ryan, I love Connor McDavid as much as anyone else.
Uh-oh, where are you going
to go? One of the most talented humans.
Don't get us in trouble, John.
I'm not going to get you in trouble. I love you, Connie. Can I call you Connie? But it's so funny because Morgan Wallen, no matter what you think of him, his opinions, whatever, he's a pretty cool guy, right? He just has a swagger. He's walking out. And Connor's a much more humble guy. He's a laid-back dude. And, Morgan's like got this strut to him and he's singing along to the words and he's putting his arms in the air and there's like a twang to just the way he's existing, you're just like, oh, look at this guy. And then Connor's just kind of like, He's like a kid at the zoo, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, just looking around like, I don't know what to do here.
Well, then how is he supposed to know what to do?
I thought it was, I don't know, what's the word, endearing? I don't know. It was just, I took it all in and I was like, oh, that's great for him. But it was, I'm not going to say cringe. It's just a little awkward, but man, just great. And then of course, Morgan brought his entire band out for the Saturday. So awesome. Not as awesome if you're a big Edmonton Oilers fan, but awesome that he brought out his entire band because they've been on a huge tour. And just with what we're talking about here, I'll just throw this in 5 seconds. We're talking about, how everyone's divided right now. Everyone hates people for their political beliefs. Morgan Wallen, this is a guy, I don't agree with a damn thing this guy does or says. I mean, this is a guy openly caught on video using racial slurs. He openly defied COVID protocols through the whole pandemic, threw a bar stool right after that down from the top floor of a bar, almost could have hurt or killed somebody. The whole SNL debacle, acting like a baby, like everything he does just makes me, ugh. But you know what? I think in this day and age, it's okay to find the good pieces of people you don't agree with and don't like at all, because I went to his show and I enjoyed the piece of him I like, his talent, his art, right? And that's a big thing for me as a DJ. Like even over the weekend, I'm playing artists and I'm like, this guy's trouble. This artist is trouble. Oh, this person did that, or this person was involved in domestic violence. I think it's really important today to just find a small piece, even if it's finite, even if it's minute, of someone that you enjoy or that you like, that exists in someone that you would not agree with at all. And I think if we all did that, I know this is sounding kumbaya right now, but if we all did that, I think the world would be a better place. And that's something I think that kind of goes along with, the week we had last week.
Yeah. And I think, there's just every once in a while, people just want to, like we say it all the time, and it sort of works, I guess, as we're teeing up positive reflections here. But like a lot of times people also just want to step outside the news cycle because it's really heavy.
Dude.
Like it's heavy all the time.
It's manufactured.
And that's,
now.
I think, like every once in a while, like on our show, we're not going to like compromise our election coverage. You're never going to sound like you don't know what you're talking about. Like here, Parliament resumes today. You've got a former senior staffer in the PMO laying out what she's expecting to see the session. You're going to sound like you know what you're talking about, and you are going to be better informed by listening to our episodes. But we're also going to bring you, like in our next episode, it's going to be like a feel-good, edifying, encouraging roundtable. We're going to do like a craft beer roundtable. We're going to do some silly conversations. We'll have a group chat roundtable every once in a while that's supposed to be chill, that can get heated sometimes. Sorry, not
just
sorry.
Flips on you.
Hey, by the way, congratulations to our friend Harman Candola. Hey, Harman.
Out there with Stephen Mandel launching his campaign.
How about that, right? He gets the former mayor of Edmonton, Stephen Mandel. There were a lot of people, I think, looking back, wondering, there were some rumblings, like, is Stephen Mandel going to run again? Is he going to run? Yeah, I mean, not recently. It's too late now. The ship has sailed. But let me just say, like, he's still got some cachet in this city.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think it's like a big deal to get that sort of thing happening when Mandel came out and started sharing, like, who he was going to be showing his support for as well. Kind of interesting. But, our good pal Harman Candola has decided to officially throw his hat into the ring, and he will be seeking a seat officially on city council in that Better Edmonton party. And so I just want to wish Harman well. Like I'm sort of like keep things like political endorsements pretty tight. I think that, the last thing we want to be doing is trying to, be accused of like swaying an election.
Sure.
We don't like to interfere in the democratic process, but let me just say this, every once in a while when like a personal friend of mine and somebody that I know very well is seeking a position of elected office, and I know for a fact that this is the exact type of person that I think would improve politics, that I think is the right type of person that we want to see in these types of jobs, making important decisions on budget and community. Harman's that type of guy. And, sometimes, Harman's a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve. He loves talking to people. He loves debates. And I just think that he would be a real asset to Edmonton City Council. So I guess, you know what? I mean, John, hell, let's call it an endorsement. Joshua writes in from Newfoundland and tells us that back in 2012, he says, I was sitting in my row house in St. John's, Newfoundland. Shout out to St. John's, said, and I just lost my job. Joshua says, I told my wife I was adamant that we stay in Newfoundland, but she convinced me to apply for jobs on the mainland. And that decision brought us to Alberta, where we spent a wonderful 8 years with all of you. You Albertans, says Joshua. Your optimism filled my soul. Listen to this. This is coming from the other side of the country. He says, you hired us when all we had was education and a few contract jobs for experience. And you, Albertans, taught us the ropes. You welcomed us in as strangers from another province, and you showed us how to take risks. You're mavericks, and I love you for it. Joshua says, during COVID, we wanted to spend more time with my parents and eventually settled back in St. John's. But as one of the many Newfoundlanders and Labradorians you have welcomed, I want to thank you sincerely. This is a love letter to Alberta by way of Real Talk. He says, we're back on the island now, and I love it here, but you helped create this life, Alberta. And the only way I know is to thank you through a letter to Real Talk. He says, likely buried at the bottom of Ryan's inbox. Yeah, right, Joshua. This one jumped right to the top because it made our week. Look at this beautiful photo of the Fleming family. Joshua signs off, a father, a bureaucrat, and a hoser. I love that. Joshua, you made our week with your email. Thanks very much, and much love back to you in St. John's, Newfoundland. We like to believe that Alberta is the land of opportunity, and I'm thrilled to hear that in practice, that's exactly what it was for you and your beautiful family. You can send us your positive reflection, something somebody did or said that made your day, something that filled your bucket, something that has absolutely nothing to do with the news headlines, or maybe is a positive take on what we're seeing all around us every day. It's proudly presented the first episode of every week by our friends at Solar by Kuby. You can get a free solar quote today by visiting them online at kuby.ca. Coming up on the next episode of the show, it's a special edition of the Real Talk Roundtable featuring our friends at UCAN Youth Services. Dr. Omar Mohammed took the Edmonton mayoral debate presented by the Chamber by storm. This guy is the most gregarious candidate I've seen in a long time. We're going to go one-on-one in the Real Talk studio on the 17th. That's Wednesday of this week. And then Brian Thiessen wants to be mayor of Calgary. He's going to join us too. On Thursday, Max Fawcett is back from Alberta Oil Magazine, and we'll continue to have you covered on all the top stories through the first week as Parliament resumes right here. It's news, politics, and pop culture, doing it like nobody else, Real Talk, and we're grateful to have you a part of it. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Thanks for sharing our content with someone you know would benefit hearing from it. Make it a great Monday, friends. We'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lauren Sterlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.